The silence in the conference room was a weapon. It was heavy, polished, and sharper than any shout. Ava Bennett could feel it pressing against her temples, a luxury migraine to accompany the end of her world. Across the mahogany table, which was as long as a day without bread, Marcus Thorne, the chairman of the board, watched her with a pity so perfectly feigned it was obscene. His eyes, usually cold shards of calculation, were now veiled in false compassion. "Ava, no one is questioning your dedication," he began, his voice as smooth as velvet over steel. "You've carried Bennett Technologies higher than anyone could have imagined." Ava clenched her fists under the table, her nails digging into her palms. She didn't want his eulogies. She wanted answers. "Then explain it to me, Marcus. Explain this clause." The contract, her masterpiece, the Phoenix project that was supposed to revolutionize their industry and establish her as a visionary, lay in the center of the table. A document of 80 pages she knew by heart, except for one appendix. Appendix 11B. A legal time bomb she had never seen, surreptitiously inserted before the final signing. It stipulated that if the stock price fell by more than 40% in the 6 months following the merger, an immediate vote of no confidence could be triggered, giving the acquiring partner, a company run by a cousin of Marcus's, extraordinary restructuring powers. It was a corporate coup, disguised as a protective measure. A mere formality, Ava. A standard protection, another board member lied, without looking at her. The stock price had fallen 42% that very morning, following an anonymous leak about integration difficulties post-merger. The trap had sprung. "You betrayed me," she said, her voice low but steady. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. "Not here." Marcus had the audacity to nod. "The board has voted. For the good of the company, we must take a new direction. Your contract will be honored, of course. But as of noon, your duties as CEO are suspended." She stood up, her legs trembling slightly. The gazes of the men around the table slid over her, some with an ounce of guilt, others with the barely veiled triumph of a predator. She had spent 10 years of her life building this empire, sacrificing nights, weekends, a part of her marriage. She had become the powerful woman she had always dreamed of being, the one who depended on no one, the one her father, dead in his greasy garage, would have wanted her to never be, vulnerable. And in the space of an hour, it had all been torn away from her. As she left the room, her assistant, Sarah, was waiting, her eyes red. She didn't need to ask a question. Ava's silence said it all. Walking through the open-plan office, the whispers died down as she passed. Every bowed head was a small betrayal. She had known these people, promoted some of them, believed in them. Today, she was just a ghost in her own kingdom. The journey to the underground parking garage was an ordeal. Calls from journalists were already making her phone vibrate non-stop. "Ms. Bennett, a comment on your ousting. Bennett Technologies in free fall, the CEO disgraced." The words were like stab wounds. Then the rain began. A cold, hard rain that fell on the city the very moment she left the garage. She had forgotten her umbrella. The icy drops soaked through her silk blouse, sticking the fabric to her skin. It was one more humiliation, a small cosmic misery added to the catastrophe. And it was there, on a deserted country road she had taken to avoid traffic and prying eyes, that the final symbol of her success decided to give up on her. Her Mercedes, the car she had bought herself after her first big IPO, sputtered, coughed, and the engine died with a deathly silence. "Mommy, why did we stop moving?" The voice of Mia, her 6-year-old daughter, from the back seat, was the final crack in her armor. Ava rested her forehead against the cold steering wheel. Hot tears she had held back all day began to flow, mixing with the rain on her cheeks. "The car is just a little tired, my love," she managed to articulate, her voice breaking. In the back seat, Mia hugged her teddy bear, Barnaby. "Is it sick? Can we give it a hug?" Her daughter's innocence was both a balm and a torment. Ava tried roadside assistance. The cheerful, automated voice was an insult to her distress. After the third failure, she dropped the phone. Outside, the rain intensified. It was more than a bad day. It was a dismantling. The universe was meticulously removing every brick of the fortress she had spent a lifetime building. She got out of the car, the freezing air instantly gripping her. Her heels sank into the muddy shoulder. The open hood revealed a tangle of wires and metal that might as well have been a foreign language. She knew how to read a complex financial statement, anticipate market fluctuations, but faced with this silent engine, she was powerless. Maybe that was the lesson. In the end, she was just a woman, alone, in the rain, with a broken-down car and a little girl who was counting on her. In a fit of rage and desperation, she began to push the heavy sedan to get it off the road. It was an absurd, impossible task. Her muscles burned, her lungs screamed, the car barely moved. Every inch gained was a paltry victory against the crushing weight of her defeat. It was then that she slipped, her heel giving way on the wet asphalt. She didn't have time to fall. A hand, firm and warm, grabbed her elbow, steadying her. "Careful, ma'am. Let me help you." She turned, breathless, and looked into the calmest eyes she had ever seen. He was tall, dressed in a simple T-shirt darkened by the rain and worn-out jeans. A lock of dark hair was stuck to his forehead and a streak of grease marked his forearm like a battle tattoo. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like a man who knew how things worked, real things, things made of metal and oil. Mia had lowered the window. "Are you a superhero?" A fleeting smile lit up the man's face. "Just a mechanic, kid." Without another word, he took off his thick work jacket and placed it on Ava's shoulders. It was heavy, worn, and smelled of rain, metal, and a human warmth that surprised her. He moved to the back of the car. "Push on the steering wheel when I say so. On 3. 1, 2, 3. With his strength, the car rolled effortlessly onto the shoulder. Then, he tackled the engine. His hands moved with a quiet efficiency, an intimate knowledge of the labyrinth of parts. It only took him a few minutes. He tightened a terminal, reconnected a wire, and suddenly the engine roared, coming back to life as if by magic. Ava, trembling, fumbled in her bag. She pulled out a $100 bill, all the cash she had. "Please, take this. It's all I can." Her voice broke. "I lost everything today. My job, my dignity, and my car almost gave up on me too." The man, Luke, as she would later learn, looked at the bill, Then his gaze fell on Mia, who was watching them with wide, fascinated eyes. He gently pushed Ava's hand away. "No, you haven't lost everything," he said quietly, nodding towards Mia. "You still have her. That's payment enough for today." Those words. They landed in the chaos of her mind not as a platitude, but as a fundamental truth she had forgotten. Amid the ruin of her professional empire, the only treasure that mattered was in the back seat, hugging a teddy bear. "Thank you," she whispered, and for the first time, the word had weight, a meaning. He nodded. "Get home safe. And keep the jacket. You need it more than I do." As she got back behind the wheel, her heart a little less heavy, Mia gave him a big wave. "Goodbye, Uncle Mechanic." In the rearview mirror, Ava saw Luke Carter, standing in the pouring rain, a solid and quiet figure in the middle of the storm. The road ahead was still uncertain, but it no longer seemed quite so impossible. Part 2. Fragile Bridges. The next morning, Ava's apartment was a sanctuary of tense silence. The smell of burnt toast, a victim of her distracted mind, hung in the air. She was making calls, trying to patch the holes in a ship that had already sunk. Every conversation with a former contact was an ordeal, a mix of pity and polite distance. She had gone from being a major player to a pariah in less than 24 hours. "No, I'm not finished," she found herself whispering into the phone, more to convince herself than her interlocutor. Meanwhile, Mia was on a mission. She had insisted on baking cookies. Not just any cookies. Thank you cookies for the superhero. With chocolate chips and an extra dose of vanilla. Sitting at the large kitchen table, she decorated a plastic box with stickers of unicorns and rockets. On a piece of cardstock, she had written in clumsy but heartfelt letters, "For the rain hero." That afternoon, after picking Mia up from school, Ava felt drained. Every street corner seemed to hold a memory of her former life. The restaurant where she had signed her first big contract, the park where she had promised Mia she would spend more time with her as soon as the Phoenix project was finished. A broken promise, like so many others. "Mommy," Mia began, her small hand slipping into hers. "Can we go give the cookies to Uncle Mechanic? Please. We have to thank him properly. It's important." Ava just wanted to go home, hide under a blanket, and not move. But her daughter's pleading look, and the memory of that man's kindness, made her change her mind. "Okay, sweetie. But how do we find him?" "He said he had a garage near the old brick factory," Mia answered proudly. It was a part of the city Ava usually avoided, a neighborhood of small warehouses and workshops. She parked her Mercedes, which now seemed out of place and pretentious, in front of a modest red brick building. "Carter Auto," said a hand-painted sign. The smell of oil, metal, and strong coffee greeted them. Luke was bent over the engine of an old pickup truck, his back to them. He was humming softly, a classic rock tune that floated in the air. Mia, without any hesitation, walked in and held out the box. "We brought this for you." Luke straightened up, surprised, and a wide, genuine smile lit up his face when he saw the little girl. He crouched down to her level, wiping his hands on a rag. "For me. I don't know if I deserve this." "Yes, you do," Mia insisted. "You saved our car and you gave Mommy your super jacket." He accepted the box as if it were a treasure. Chocolate chip cookies? That's my only weakness, he said with a conspiratorial wink at Mia. Then his gaze fell on Ava, who was standing shyly by the door. "Hello. I hope you got home safely yesterday." "Yes, thank you." "Again," Ava said, feeling strangely awkward. In her world, transactions were clear, defined by contracts. This kind of unconditional kindness unsettled her. "I'm sorry to bother you." Mia was insistent. "It's no bother," he interrupted her gently. "This is the best part of my day." He opened the box, took a cookie, and bit into it with demonstrative pleasure. "Tell the chef these are the best in the whole city." Mia beamed with pride. As they stood there, a comfortable silence settled, broken only by the clinking of tools and the radio in the background. For the first time in days, Ava didn't feel judged. She wasn't the disgraced ex-CEO, just a mother with her daughter, thanking a good man. A few days later, a fine, persistent rain settled over the city. The garage was quiet. The last customer had left, and only the rain drummed softly on the tin roof. Ava had returned, under the false pretense of a slight noise in her engine. Luke hadn't found anything, but he didn't seem to be in a hurry to see her leave. "Coffee," he offered, gesturing to an old coffee pot that looked like it had survived several wars. "Only if it's strong enough to wake the dead," Ava replied with a touch of dark humor. "That's its specialty," Luke smiled, handing her a chipped but clean mug. "So, how's life after the apocalypse?" The question was direct, without pity, and strangely refreshing. "It's quiet," she admitted. "Too quiet. I spent a decade running from one emergency to the next. Now, the phone doesn't ring anymore." They sat in two old mismatched armchairs in a corner of the garage. The smell of metal and oil was strangely comforting. "My father was a mechanic," she said suddenly. "He had a small garage just like this one. He always said you could tell everything about a person by looking at how they maintained their car. He would have hated mine," she added with a sad smile. "Too perfect on the outside, too complicated on the inside." "It seems you take after him," Luke said. "You try to fix everything." "He died in his garage. A faulty lift. I was 12. The confession slipped out, raw and unvarnished. "After that, I swore I would never be trapped by machines, by a lack of money. I wanted to build something unbreakable." She laughed, a joyless sound. "Look where that got me." Luke let her talk, his respectful silence worth more than any platitude. Then, he took a sip of his coffee. "For me, it was speed. I used to race cars. Local circuits, sometimes bigger ones. It was my whole life. The adrenaline, the roar of the engines." His gaze drifted off. "I had a teammate, Marco. He was more than a friend, he was my brother. One night, at the Blackwood Circuit, his car had a mechanical failure in a fast corner. The steering gave out." He paused, his jaw tightening. He didn't survive the crash. The weight of his confession joined Ava's in the air of the garage. Two souls haunted by ghosts of metal and broken ambition. "I quit everything after that," Luke continued. "The sound of the engines didn't sound the same anymore. I opened this garage. I fix people's cars. I help them get home safely. It's slower. It's quieter. But nobody dies. They sat in silence, the rain their only witness. Ava realized something profound. She had spent her life trying to escape her father's world, only to find a semblance of peace in a place that strangely resembled it, alongside a man who, like her, had learned the hard way that some things can't be fixed. The weeks that followed fell into a new, unexpected rhythm. Ava's accidental visits to the garage became a tacit ritual. Sometimes she brought pastries. Sometimes Luke had set aside a magazine article on classic cars he thought she might find interesting. Mia, for her part, had officially made the garage her after-school headquarters, drawing at a corner of the workbench while Luke worked. Their relationship was built on these small things. On the way Luke patiently explained the difference between an alternator and a timing belt, and on the way Ava listened, fascinated not by the mechanics, but by the passion in his voice. One evening, the faucet in Ava's kitchen began to leak catastrophically. Before she could call an overpriced plumber, Luke was at her door with a toolbox, acting as if it were nothing. He refused to be paid, only accepting dinner as payment. That's how their first real date happened, although no one called it that. They ordered pizzas and ate at Ava's kitchen table, while Mia recounted in great detail an epic quarrel in the schoolyard. Ava watched Luke interact with her daughter, seeing him treat her not like a child, but as a person in her own right, listening to her stories with sincere interest. She felt a warmth in her chest, a feeling she hadn't had in a long time. The feeling of not being alone in carrying the world. It was Mia who, with her disarming innocence, put a name to what was happening. One evening, as she was drawing, she looked up and asked, "Mommy, is Uncle Luke going to be our family?" Ava was taken aback. "Well, honey, he's a very dear friend." "No," Mia insisted. "A family, like in the books. He makes you smile. A real smile, not the work smile you used to do." Her daughter's words struck her. It was true. With Luke, she didn't have to play a role. She could just be Ava. Tired, worried, but also curious and, more often, happy. Proof of this transformation arrived on a Tuesday morning. Ava's assistant, Sarah, who had stayed in touch, called her, her voice excited. "Ava, I have something. An offer. The Argentum Group. They want to buy a majority stake in Bennett Tech. And they want to keep you as CEO. It's a lifeline. A real one. The Argentum Group. An industry titan, known for its aggressive acquisitions and bottomless pockets. It was the way out of the crisis she no longer dared to dream of. The return to the top. 2 days later, she was back in her element, a conference room at the top of a skyscraper overlooking the entire city. Argentum's CEO, a charismatic man named Richard Sterling, was all smiles and promises. "Your company has solid fundamentals, Ava. It just needs a capital injection and a firm hand to get through this storm. Our hand and yours." The offer was tempting. It would save hundreds of jobs, her legacy, her reputation. She was on the verge of accepting, her heart pounding at the idea of her revenge. It was then that her gaze was drawn to the framed photos on the wall of Sterling's office. Photos of yachts, private jets, and a racing team. Her blood ran cold. In the center of the photo, a young Luke was smiling broadly, his arm around another driver's shoulders. Both wore racing suits bearing a clearly visible logo, that of the Argentum Group. "Ah, yes," Sterling said, following her gaze. "We sponsored a team a few years ago. Excellent publicity. A shame it ended tragically. One of our drivers had a fatal accident. Blackwood, I believe. A terrible business." He said these words with the same casualness as if he were talking about the weather. For him, Marco's death was just a bad investment, a line in an annual report. For Luke, it was the end of a world. Ava felt the floor give way beneath her. This wasn't a lifeline. It was a pact with the devil. The same devil who had financed the car that had killed Luke's friend. She went through the rest of the meeting on autopilot, her answers vague and polite. She returned home in a daze. That night, she didn't sleep. She saw Luke's face, his quiet kindness, the veiled sadness in his eyes when he spoke of the past. And she saw Sterling's predatory smile. She had a choice. Reclaim her place in a world of sharks, or stay in the simple but honest world she was just beginning to build. By morning, her decision was made. At 9 a.m. sharp, she called Richard Sterling. "Richard, it's Ava Bennett. I thank you for your generous offer," she said, her voice calm and assured. "But I must decline." There was a surprised silence on the other end of the line. "Do you realize what you're refusing, Ava? You're choosing to let your company sink out of pride." "No," she replied. "I'm choosing not to build my future on the ruins of someone else's past. My integrity is not for sale." She hung up before he could reply. She felt terrified, but also incredibly free. She may have lost her empire, but she had just found her soul. Part 4. The War. She found Luke at the garage, his hands deep in the guts of an engine. He looked up when she walked in, her expression serious. "I told them no," she said simply. He put down his wrench. "To whom?" "Argentum. The buyout offer." She took a deep breath. "Luke, they sponsored your team. Your old team. I saw a photo in their office." Luke's face hardened. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place in his mind. The mechanical failure. The rumors hushed up at the time about substandard parts being used to cut costs. It all took on a new and monstrous meaning. "You refused their money because of that?" he asked, his voice low. "I couldn't. Not after what you told me. Not with their money." He looked at her for a long moment, a mixture of gratitude and contained fury in his eyes. "Most people would have signed," he said. "I'm not most people," she replied. "Not anymore." It was there, amidst the smells of oil and metal, that their alliance was sealed. "They're not going to get away with this," Luke said, his voice vibrating with determination. "Marco deserves justice." They began a new battle, not for money or power, but for the truth. Luke reactivated his old contacts in the racing world, disgruntled mechanics, retired drivers, people who had been afraid to speak up at the time. Ava used her research skills, diving into financial archives, corporate reports, looking for proof that Argentum had knowingly endangered its drivers for economic reasons. But as they began to gather evidence, another front opened up. A registered letter arrived one afternoon. It was from her ex-in-law's lawyers. They were filing for sole custody of Mia, arguing that Ava's precarious professional and financial situation, as well as her reckless behavior in refusing Argentum's rescue offer, proved she was an unstable and unfit mother. The document fell from her hands. It was a low, vicious blow, and she immediately suspected Sterling's influence behind the attack. He wasn't content to see her fail. He wanted to destroy her. Fear, a pure and visceral fear she had never known, not even during her fall from Bennett Tech, overwhelmed her. They wanted to take Mia from her. Luke arrived that evening to find her sitting in the dark, the letter on the table like a death sentence. He read it, his face turning to stone. He didn't say, "It's going to be okay." He said, "We are going to fight this. Together." The days that followed were a blur of hard work and anguish. By day, they hunted for evidence against Argentum. By night, Ava prepared her defense with her lawyer, gathering testimonies about her qualities as a mother. Luke became her rock. He took care of Mia when she had to meet her lawyer late at night. He made sure she ate, that she slept, bringing her coffee in the middle of the night as she was buried under papers. He never left her alone to face her demons. One night, when the pressure had become unbearable, he found her in tears in her kitchen. Without a word, he took her in his arms. She clung to him, finally letting out all the fear and exhaustion. "I'm scared, Luke," she sobbed against his shoulder. "I'm so scared of losing her." "You won't lose her," he said, his voice a reassuring whisper in her hair. "Because you are not alone in this fight. I'm here." Part 5. The Light. The breakthrough came from an old retired mechanic whom Luke finally tracked down in a small town in Ohio. The man, consumed by guilt for years, provided them with the missing piece. Internal memos from Argentum proving that management was aware of the defects in the steering parts but had refused to replace them so as not to exceed the sponsorship budget. It was irrefutable proof. Ava gave the entire file to a reputable investigative journalist she trusted. The article had the effect of a bombshell. Argentum scandal, integrity before profit. The headline was accompanied by a photo of Ava, and her refusal of the buyout offer was presented as the act of courage that had triggered everything. Argentum's stock collapsed. Investigations were opened. Richard Sterling was forced to resign. Ava's reputation, far from being destroyed, was restored. She had become a symbol of ethics in a world that lacked it. But the most important battle was yet to come. On the day of the custody hearing, Ava felt both strong from her victory against Argentum and terrified of what was at stake. Her ex-in-laws were there, cold and contemptuous. Their lawyer portrayed her as a career-obsessed woman, then as an unstable person who had made irrational choices. When Luke was called to the stand as a character witness, her heart stopped. He sat down, calm and dignified. He didn't talk about Bennett Tech or Argentum. He talked about Ava, the mother. "I have seen Ava Bennett at the height of her glory, and I have seen her when she thought she had lost everything," he said, his voice echoing in the silence of the courtroom. "But the only time I have ever seen her truly scared was at the thought that someone might take her daughter away. Everything she does, every single battle she fights, is guided by one thing: the infinite love she has for Mia. Mia is not a part of her life. She is its center." When the judge delivered her decision, her words were unequivocal. The custody request was denied, described as malicious and unfounded. Full custody remained with Ava. Outside, on the steps of the courthouse, Luke was waiting. Mia ran into his arms. Ava approached slowly, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. Without a word, she threw herself into Luke's arms, and for the first time, it was not a gesture of desperation, but a gesture of infinite love and gratitude. A few weeks later, she convened the board of directors of Bennett Technologies one last time. The company was stabilizing. New investors, attracted by her new reputation, were lining up. They begged her to stay. She smiled. "I am proud of what we have built. But I have been running a marathon for 10 years. It's time for me to walk a little. I am stepping down as CEO. I will remain a consultant if you wish, but my life is elsewhere now." She left the building, not as a fallen queen, but as a woman who had chosen her own definition of success. A year later, a new sign hung on the red brick garage. Carter and Bennett, Auto Repair and Coffee Bar. One side was Luke's domain, with its lifts and the smell of oil. The other was Ava's, a warm corner with an espresso machine, comfortable armchairs, and shelves of books. Mia had her own drawing corner, her colorful artwork lining the walls. Their life was simple, paced by work, Mia's laughter, and the quiet moments shared at the end of the day, sitting on the bench in front of the garage. One afternoon, Luke asked Ava to come to the workshop. There sat an old, pale blue Ford, beautifully restored, its chrome shining in the sun. It was her father's car. "It took me a while to track it down and get it back in shape," Luke said. "I thought it was time for it to come home." Tears welled up in Ava's eyes. He hadn't just repaired a car. He had repaired a part of her past, healed an old wound. That evening, sitting all three of them on the bench, watching the sunset, Ava knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had lost a kingdom to find a home. She had stopped wanting to build unbreakable things to learn how to repair, with patience and love, what was broken. And she had understood that the greatest strength was not in never falling, but in knowing who would be there to help you get back up. Luke took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. This was success. It was this peaceful silence, this calmly beating heart, and the promise of all the tomorrows to come.